Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
What if you had magicians, however you want to define that term, on one side of the room, and scientists, however you want to define that term, on the other side of the room, and they had a showdown, however you define that? Who would win? Well, in this episode, we are going to find out. Maybe. Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. I am one of your hosts, Will Rose, aka Wilbo Baggins, and with me, I have one of my favorite scientists, Andy Walsh. Andy, how are you doing, and what are you geeking out on these days?
Hi, Will. I'm doing well, thank you. And what am I geeking out on? Well, recently I finished watching the first season of the show Dark Matter on Apple TV. Jennifer Connelly and Joel Edgerton, I think. It's a multiverse show. So kind of, following up on the theme last time I was talking science on the podcast, we were talking about the multiverse. And so, yeah, it's an interesting show about basically a guy gets kidnapped by his mirror universe version of himself. He steals his life, right? So their worlds diverged when he decided to marry his wife, or in the other universe, he decided, no, I'm going to commit myself to my job and not continue in this relationship. And so the guy who chose career uses his career to build a machine to travel the multiverse and go into the other world and kidnap his alter ego and just take over his life, and sends his alter ego back to his home universe. So they basically swap universes, but only one of them consensually. So, and then it unravels from there in terms of, trying to find a way back and what are the implications of all that. And yeah, so that's not a spoiler. That's pretty much the first, few minutes of the first episode is kind of setting up all that premise. So
nice.
Yeah,
it's just one season on Apple Plus.
So far, just one season. I believe there's the intention to have more, but that's all there is right now.
So Freaky Friday, except you just switch multiverses of yourself.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
All right. It's hard to boil down just to one thing I'm geeking out on. I will say I'm loving Severance, which is kind of like a swap kind of thing that they do with kind of workplace, regular life. It's very well done. It's the hottest show on TV right now, and love it. I'm loving these movie trailers we have coming out, whether it's Superman or Fantastic Four. Super excited about the movies we have coming up, comic book movies, just here shortly. And then I will say that I'm all in on this new animated series on Disney Plus, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I'm liking this new animated show. I like the feel. I like the vibe. It's from the MC universe, kind of Tom Holland-ish kind of timeline early in his career or life as Spider-Man, but it has a great feel to it. Feels like a comic book right on the screen. And I will say that this is one of the shows that I'm not skipping the intro. It has that option, skip intro, and I'm not, because the song is great, the graphics, animation is great, and then the final image is like a comic book cover that's going to share with you what's going to happen in that particular episode. So one is with focus on Osborn, and like his face is up on kind of the final kind of comic book cover leading you in, which is, if you're going to hit me in the feels for comic books, show me a good cover and then let that cover tell me what's going to happen in the episode. I'm good. So I'm liking it. I don't know, Andy, if you're watching that animated series yet or not.
I caught the first 2 episodes from last week. I'm not up to date on, I think there were new episodes today. Is that right?
Yeah, they dropped 3 today, and I got through one of them this morning. So there's 2 more waiting for me later on. So there's 5, as of recording, 5 episodes out there.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Well, again, hey, geeks, glad that you're here. Welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is one of our yearly themes episode, Finding the Good, where we pit one IP or fandom against or topic against the other, and then it's our task to not only make the case for the particular franchise we're choosing, but also to try to find the good in the other side. And Andy, I don't know if you know this. This may be news to your ears, but there's a lot of division and polarization in our world right now, and even in the things we geek out on and the fandoms. And, it's been our goal and vision at Systematic Geekology to create a different kind of conversation and to curate healthy conversations around these things, even if we disagree about things, to create kind of a different narrative out there and not be as toxic or as divisive. And even if there's something we really, really like or choose, to try to find the good in the other. And that's a tall task these days in all areas of life. But that's what we're going to do. And so, for example, we have some episodes coming up: Starfleet versus Klingons, vampires versus werewolves, even elves versus dwarves, and even Bruce Lee versus Jackie Chan. And all those topics, I kind of know what I would choose. But today, there's no real specific fandom or IP. We're just picking like a theme or topic, and then kind of searching for an IP that we could wrap around that, and then share that a little bit. So today is magic versus science. Of course, magic, all kinds of magical realms are in our fandoms, and of course, science and tech and science fiction and speculative fiction is all part of our fandoms. So I like to play with that because it's a big part of our lives. And so if we do magic versus science, man, I hope that one of them can survive, Andy. It may be that it may be to the death today, and that from here on out, we either destroy magic or destroy science. I'm nervous.
So here's a hot take that'll get the ball rolling.
Okay.
If we destroyed magic, would anyone notice?
Oh man, that's right. I guess there'd be some shows in Vegas that would some unemployed people and.
But that's just applied science, right? We call it magic, but it's really, applied psychology. And
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. That's a good hot take. Coming out firing. Andy coming out, shots fired already early. Man, before we get too far into the episode, we just want to help, invite you to consider rating and reviewing the show on whatever device you are on. It really helps us get out there in the world. And we want to thank our supporters. We can't do this podcast or what we do with Systematic Geekology without you. So today we specifically want to thank Jonathan Augustine. Jonathan, thank you so much for your support, buddy. We really appreciate it. And we want to invite our listeners that you can support the show as little as $3 a month. And a little birdie told me, someone shared with me that we have over 20,000 subscribers around the world. And to all you subscribers out there, your listeners, if just 100 of you joined up for $3 a month, we could get a table at a Comic-Con and go out into the world, maybe even travel the country to certain Comic-Cons and let people know who we are. So help support the show, and thanks for everything that you do with us. And we're glad to geek out with you. Okay, and now to the episode. You heard those shots fired. No specific IP, just magic versus science. And so drum roll, Andy, what did you choose? And then is there a particular IP attached to magic or science that you want to lift up as an example of why either nobody would notice about magic or how science applies to our daily lives? Andy, go for it.
Sure. So I don't think it will come as a surprise after that introduction that I come down on the side of science. I like my fiction with science in it. There's certainly plenty of stories with magic that I have enjoyed, and I have been a fan of stage magic. We've got a cool venue here in Pittsburgh that's just for stage magic. I've been several times. Nice. And had a great time every time. Some super talented folks do that kind of stuff, and I that's not what I'm talking about. I have a lot of respect for the work that goes into that kind of entertainment.
Don't find the good in it yet. Okay. We have a battle first. There you go.
All right. I don't know how this works.
I know we're too polite at Systematic Geekology to throw too much shade. Yeah. At the beginning.
But yeah, so I would come down on the side of science, and I think if we're looking for somewhere to have that conversation, to me, it's a little bit obvious, but to me, the place where those things kind of hit the road, the rubber hits the road the most, is in superhero comics, right? Because you've got all these different characters that have come from different backgrounds and different origins that then have to coexist in the same universe, and so you get a lot of those magical characters bumping up against science characters, and the egos of isn't magic just science we haven't figured out yet, or right. All that kind of stuff. And so Tony Stark being sniffy towards Doctor Strange, and Mr. Fantastic saying that he doesn't believe in vampires even though he's met Blade, which was an interesting take in the most recent Blood Hunt event. Yep. I don't know if you read any of that.
I did.
The Fantastic Four time. Yeah, I was just like, I love Ryan North. I love his Fantastic Four. I like Reed Richards, but man, I did not understand the hairs that were being split there. But yeah, so that that kind of thing comes up a lot. I mean, maybe even most famously, right, Superman. Superman, his only weakness is magic, or one of his weaknesses. Obviously, his other weakness is famously kryptonite. But they've also really played up the whole thing that magic is another weakness of his, to give him something, right? To give Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, something to do when the two of them are standing next to each other, I guess. So that to me seems like an obvious place if we want to have a more concrete conversation. Of where the two are very prominent in equal measure. So if you were to, as a scientist, share with us, again, there might be some first listeners out there who do, what kind of science do you do? And then if someone, like, you're in an elevator and you only have like 10 seconds with them, 20 seconds with them, and they're like, oh, define science. What is science? How would you kind of capture that to define that term, just to kind of know where we're at? Sure. So, in terms of the science that I do, my training is in the biology of infectious diseases. And for the past 15 years or so, I've worked for a software company that provides software to public health departments, helping them to analyze electronic data from healthcare settings, primarily emergency departments, hospitals, to identify patterns that are relevant to public health departments. So it requires some understanding of the different things that make people sick and the different reasons why people go and seek healthcare, and an understanding of computer programming and of statistical analysis and so forth, to kind of put that all together to help the folks who work on the front lines of public health, who work for your state, your county, your city, or the federal government, to do the actual kind of work of public health, giving them tools to help them understand better what's going on in their communities. Man, with this day and age, how is your job secure? You doing okay?
with what I'm hearing out
question.
there. Yeah.
We are paid via contracts with primarily state health departments.
Okay.
They get a lot of their funding through the CDC.
Okay.
A lot of that funding has been, dedicated or already set aside for the next couple of years. So the kind of short to medium term should be okay.
Okay.
In a normal situation, if somebody decides to just turn off the federal funding in ways that are unprecedented, then we might have a whole other kind of situation. But I mean, that is the reality of public health in this country. If you don't know, some of the budget comes from your state taxes, but a lot of it comes from grants that the CDC awards to state and county health departments.
Oof. Yes. Well, that's going to make it hard for me to not choose science right now. But, we have to have a versus. Someone says, oh, then what is science? Define science. How would you, like, in a phrase or two, how would you define that term? Yeah.
So I would say that, science is primarily a method. It's about how we study the physical world. It's a systematic study of the physical world to understand causes and effects that are consistent over time, right? So things that happen once are hard to study with science, but things that happen many times or patterns that occur in many different settings that we can repeatedly demonstrate, those are the kinds of things that we can study with science and understand how different things cause, what are the different causes that are possible in the world and what are the different effects that those causes have.
Yeah. So it's like there's a repetitive research and experiments to try to figure out patterns or repeatable patterns to help us figure out the reality of the physical world that's around us. So the random things that happen, but if it happens more than once, scientists aren't just trying to prove something, that sometimes they're trying to prove something doesn't happen the way it is. So they're their own kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like sometimes they're doing research to disprove themselves and prove themselves to see what kind of research is out there to help the world. So I like it that it's not just in a lab, but you're doing all these kinds of things to, I guess, your own devil's advocate at times to try to make sure you really have it right, to do these repetitive research projects or experiments to make sure what you see is really happening in front of you.
Yeah, if you want to be successful in science, you do need to be very critical of your own results, right? You shouldn't believe your own hype. You should, because it's ultimately it's a social endeavor. It's a community endeavor, right? It is not. It's about kind of coming to a shared understanding. What are the things that we can all agree on through applying the same methods to the same shared external reality, right? So things that are internal to myself are hard to study with science because they're part of my own, subjective reality that other people can't interrogate in the same way. So it's about coming together and working together to understand the shared external reality, objective reality, whatever kind of words you want to use, that we all have access to together. And so, so that does make it a communal project, and that means that if I'm throwing a lot of ideas out there that I haven't really thought very carefully about and haven't tested very thoroughly, I'm going to waste everybody's time because they're going to go and chase them, and then they're going to find that I wasn't right. And so part of being a good scientist and being a good part of that scientific community is being careful that you don't go and tell everybody else about things until you're pretty confident that you have figured it out yourself, and you've kind of answered all the questions or ruled out all the other possible explanations before you go and say, I think the answer might be X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, if you're chasing fame or to be the first one to put something out there or grant money or whatever, you're chasing these things. If you're not careful for what you're doing, you're going to get found out real fast. What you're doing isn't correct, or you have to start all over again and be seen or shown not to be true or as a fraud or whatever. So there's some we'll get later down. It's hard for me not to go down this sort of sense, but there's members of my church who are researchers and scientists at the University of North Carolina and even at CERN over in Switzerland. And And even when they think they're onto something, they're like, oh, we're not going to release this yet. Something might be coming down the road, but we got to be careful. We have a lot more experiments and examination and experience to make sure what we're saying is going to be correct. And I think that was some people's, hard times during the pandemic. There was a sense of urgency, but they're also watching, science happen in real time where they're like, they say one thing, but now they're saying this other thing. Well, we're learning as we go here. And that plane was being built while it was still flying. And so there's urgency, but science is out there. There are new things that happen all the time, but, it's fascinating. And yeah, thanks for what you do, Andy, and in this day and age. Oh boy. All right. So for sake of verses, I'm choosing magic, and I do like the hard sciences, and I like the science in my fiction, and I'm a fan of like Reed Richards and Tony Stark, those kinds of characters. But man, I really love the magical realms, whether it's Middle Earth and Tolkien or Narnia, Harry Potter. I like Harry Potter. Even Star Wars with the Force is this kind of magical force, mysterious magic space wizard that's in this kind of space fantasy opera. But I'm choosing Doctor Strange, and he has science background. He was a surgeon. He's a scientist. But I really love how that first movie captured this dilemma of that he couldn't fix his whole life with the science around him. He had to go and find the guru or the spiritual realm or someone to help him out, to show him a different reality, whether it's different dimensions or multiverse realities or spells or whatever. He's having to wrestle with this idea of mystery, awe, enchantment, magic, and faith, along with understanding the world through physical means as a doctor who's so used to fixing other people. So the magician that I'm choosing, there's a lot out there. The magic I'm going to pick is Doctor Strange, because he is the Sorcerer Supreme. He's the Sorcerer Supreme. Well, not anymore in Marvel Comics. Now Doctor Doom is. That's coming up later. Oh boy, we'll see what happens with that. But for a long time, Doctor Strange was Sorcerer Supreme, and I'm choosing magic. So now here we have, you alluded to it. There's sometimes, whether it's Reed Richards or Tony Stark, button heads against Doctor Strange. How do you see this battle to the end, Andy? Doctor Strange versus, the hard, closed-minded scientist of Tony Stark.
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge because, right, the first rule of storytelling is, especially in comic book storytelling, is, well, whose book is this event happening in, right? Mm-hmm. If it's a Doctor Strange story, then obviously magic is gonna come out on top, or there's gonna be something that can only be solved with magic. And if it's a Tony Stark book, or if we want to go straight up, right? For a while, Hank Pym was the scientist supreme of the Marvel universe.
100%, good pull. Yep, 100%.
And there's a great one shot by Mark Waid. I apologize because I'm forgetting who the artist was on it. And it's one of these goofy books. It has a goofy title like Age of Ultron AU or something like that. When they were, when they were putting those like periods and letters after the titles of comics, it's like event tie-ins or whatever. It was this one shot about Hank Pym and how he is he's a scientist for the purest sake of curiosity and wonder, and trying to just kind of figure out the world and be curious about the world, and with a sense of whimsy and delight, and not trying, he's not a Tony Stark trying to engineer something that he can sell or that will fix a certain problem. He just wants to know more about the world because he wants to know more about the world, and you get a little bit of that. I mean, even in the movies, right, with Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, he's much grumpier, right? He's not a terribly likable character. He's not as charismatic as Tony Stark or Stephen Strange, but man, that guy loves ants, and he is just going to study ants and figure out ants because he wants to know what makes them tick. And yeah, he also invented this thing that makes him be able to shrink and grow, and has lots of technological applications. And he's not quite the same sort of pure scientist in that setting, but he's still got his love of ants and he gets that moment in Ant-Man Quantumania where he gets to ride in and save the day with his ant friends. And I really enjoyed that for all the other goofiness of that movie.
Consider subscribing on YouTube, where you can get some other stuff. You get exclusive series like our comic book catch-up, Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and a companion series we do each year to go with our annual theme. You also get access to Friday Night Frights and Wednesday Night Weeaboo and Spidey Swing Bys with Christian Ashley. You get access to other exclusive shorts like what I'm going to be doing soon are non-canon, where I'm going to be reviewing different IPs that are outside of canon from our favorite fandoms or the Bible and discussing whether or not it should be canon. You also can get a short of Will's Wednesday pull list. So if you're into comic books, Will goes through his favorites of each week's pull list for himself. You also get other bonuses over there. Most of our surprise content we'll put straight to YouTube going live over there that you can check out. And a lot of our regular episodes are also posted on YouTube if you just want to see our smiling faces.
But yeah, so, my struggle with this is that, what do we mean by magic? And what does it mean when science goes up and get magic? We do this a lot in narrative settings because magic is a narrative device. But you get that, question, is it just science we haven't figured out? Like, thinking about the Doctor Strange movie, right? Doctor Strange has some very specific things that he's able to do. He's able to teleport, essentially, make portals and move from one part of space to another. He can turn back time. All these things deal with aspects of physical reality, right? Space and time and so forth. And there are proposals, largely from different solutions of general relativity of how you could actually travel, across space in that way, or, manipulate time in different ways. And so, if somebody could actually do the things that Doctor Strange could do, would that be magic or would it be science? Because we could study it, repeat, he can consistently make those portals or whatever. And so, maybe I'll put the onus on you here. What do we mean by magic? How do we? I don't know how to decide this question of magic versus science until we know really sure what we mean when we're talking about magic.
I like that because I presented you with the question of what is science. You presented what is magic, and I don't have a definitive term other than using its own words to define itself, like enchantment and wonder and awe and mystery and those kinds of things. You're casting spells or tapping into a spiritual realm to make unbelievable things believable in front of you, or you're manipulating reality to your own will. And so I think about those passages in even the scripture that talks about kind of forbidding of magic, that you're going down a road that's only powers specifically that are God's, which is like the sovereignty over the physical and spiritual realm and world. And so magicians are manipulating, becoming gods their own selves by tapping into godlike powers to control reality. And so whereas, there were those back in the day that were upset of Tolkien and Narnia, or maybe not Narnia as much, but Harry Potter is like, oh, you can't read those. Christians can't read those books because dealing with magic and witches and sorcerers, they scare us. There's an element of, I guess, that the 10 Commandments and obeying the first commandment, not having any idols and those kinds of things, of what you're really doing with your power. But for me, and kind of the creative, imaginative fandoms IPs that we follow, it's a narrative device to tap into kind of the supernatural, spiritual realm of the realities around them. And some have hard rules when it comes to the science that they're using, and others are just like, well, it's just magic. We're just casting a spell. We can do whatever we want. So yeah, I mean, maybe there's a listener out there, someone who's listening who's like, no, that's not how you define magic. Or if there's a real magician out there who does it and he's talking about illusion, or she's talking about illusion and sleight of hand and a way to help somebody perceive something differently. I don't know. Maybe there's a better way to define it. But I think where the division is that, you have, like you said, you have the people who are tapping into, or the characters tapping into mystery, spells, and the scientists are like you said, just magic is just something that science hasn't figured out, but that God in the gaps argument, we'll figure it out at some point from a scientific point of view. And I think of that line from The Martian. Like, one of the things I would have pulled, if I would have chosen science, I would have said The Martian, the book and the movie, where he says, well, I'm gonna solve this problem because I'm gonna science the beep out of this thing. And so, yeah, at some point we're gonna figure it out. Our science is gonna catch up with the mystery around us and be like, yeah, we can figure out that. We'll know the answers at some point. So, as a person, I guess that's kind of where the division goes at, where maybe one leans into the mystery and the spiritual realm of things, and the science like, oh, we'll figure it out at some point, and you're just not giving us the time. Or maybe the scientists will look where you believe in fairy tales, and the scientist or the magician is like, oh, you're just all about the facts and the numbers and don't want to see mystery in the world. That's kind of the straw man stereotype between the two, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one way that it gets put. And yeah, I mean, if we're talking about magic as, directly imposing one's will on reality or something like that, then, I don't see how science wins against that, because science will always be constrained by, certain rules of cause and effect and what can be done. And so if you can just kind of circumvent that with, oh, I just want things to be the way that I want them to be, there'll always be a loophole. There'll always be some way to get around things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this idea that that science eliminates all the wonder and mystery and beauty and so forth is kind of that straw man. Why we don't like science, or what's bad about science, or what's stereotypical about scientists. And I think there is a certain sort of overly reductionist way that you can go about science, or maybe more to the point that you can go about thinking about the world and your sort of metaphysics, that the only thing that matters is kind of the fundamental particles, the smallest bits, and everything else is just sort of make believe or stories that we tell ourselves. But it's the particles that and the forces that matter, that are the only things that are real. And I think that is unhelpful, and that encourages a kind of pushback of, but what about love or beauty or those kinds of things. And I think a healthier way to approach science is to acknowledge that these things are real. They operate at different levels of organization or different levels of reality, in terms of scale and so forth. Right? We don't ascribe love to electrons and photons and so forth.
Right.
But it is a real category of phenomenon that is useful when you're talking about people and the relationships between people. And to deny that just because there isn't a quantum field from which love emerges directly, I think is a bit silly. And I think most people would acknowledge that. I don't think that's a particularly I don't think that's a minority view or anything like that, but I do think you can find the sort of very strident views that kind of sometimes get the most attention in either direction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, listeners, the irony here is that Andy is a scientist who also happens to be a person of faith, and I am a minister who also has done a lot of work with faith and science, and helping create a healthy conversation between the two, and have many members of my church here in a university setting who are in the sciences, whether evolutionary biologists or particle physicists. And so those big questions around the two things, we're very open and really seek to have healthy conversations between the two and see how they can work together. So, we're going to have a faith and science conversation at some point a little bit later on. But in terms of magic, I think that this kind of loss of enchantment in the world or mystery, there's this reductionism to materialism when it comes to science. But really, and the scientists that I've spoken to, if I'm going to find the good in the other now and leap over to your side, that scientists that I've spoken to, it is mystery and awe and wonder that drove them to study the sciences, to learn more about what they're curious about. And as they are learning, there's always a question to chase. There's always awe and mystery and and wonder when it comes to that. Now, there's exceptions to the rule, but all, the ones that I speak to and the ones I've had experience with, they still experience enchantment and mystery and awe and wonder when it comes to whatever they're studying or trying to prove or disprove in the sciences to understand the world. And there's still more to learn. You never run out of things to learn. And I think, for me, looking over the fact that, yeah, even though Tony Stark is blah, 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 but, and Reed Richards, they're going to crunch the numbers to try to find a solution. I love how you said Hank Pym is scientist supreme, but they're still work on their teammates with other people who have superpowers and magic and mystery when it comes around to them. They're just using their gifts and their scientific mind to help solve the problems or use that around. I'm sure if someone's looking at, an ant grow or someone shrink down to the size of an ant, they're like, that's magic, even though they're using quantum Pym particles that are, a part of the physical universe to actualize and make that happen. To an outsider, wow, you're just using magic. Look at that neat, cool trick superpower, but they're really using science. So that's how I kind of, to switch to find the good in the other. There's still this aspect of enchantment and wonder and mystery and wanting to help the world that they're a part of.
Yeah, that's I like all that. Thank you for all that. That's a cool way of looking at things. And to think about sort of magic, right, it as something that exists largely in a storytelling setting, right? There is definitely value in telling stories about things that don't exist in the real world or don't exist in the real world yet, right? Because that's how we move forward in making new discoveries, making new inventions, or even just finding new ways of talking about the world, right? Even that can be valuable if it brings people together or if it helps people collaborate on different things. And so, if we kind of flip it around of, or magic is science, I guess I'm flipping around, but if looking at magic as science, things that science haven't figured out yet, we need things that science haven't figured out yet so that we have more science to work on.
Yeah.
And having those stories, even something like Doctor Strange, right? That can inspire people's imagination, or Star Wars. I mean, how many people have been inspired by Star Wars to pursue different kinds of careers in all kinds of different things. Some of them scientific, some of them less so. But in terms of working to bring people together, to bring good into the world, there are various people now that are Jedi, right? So you talk about speaking something into the world, into existence, right? George Lucas came up with the concept of Jedi, and now there are Jedi in the world, and there are Quidditch players, and that it sounds hokey, right, in the abstract, but that is actually something that people do on the regular is speak things into existence by describing a future that people want to go to, and then we work towards it to get there. And if that brings people together, if that builds communities, if that builds relationships, if that builds technology or tools that we can use to make people's lives better, that's all valuable stuff.
Yeah. I think of the conversion of Han Solo, right? Like at the beginning of New Hope, he's like, hokey religions are no match for a blaster, or however he says it. And then eventually you get to Force Awakens and he's like, it's true. It's all true. I believe I've seen lots of things and it's all true. So it's that experience with the other that helps you understand an enlarged universe. And so I think magic, science together, working on the same team, I think it'd be helpful for the world. So, I don't know how much we set up this. We really wasn't like a deadly blow by blow death match here, but we tried to lift up these two things, and then finding the good in the other. I think both of us in our realms of our vocation in our world, but also the stories we like, we're pretty much on the same page, Andy, when it comes to to see the good in the other.
Yeah, I mean, you and I think the Last Jedi is the only thing that we have found any kind of place to differ on. But yeah, I think we do generally have a lot of same tastes and preferences and enjoy the same things.
Yeah, maybe we'll do Finding the Good. I think we've done that before.
Yeah, I don't think we need to relive that conversation. It just was the only thing that came to mind.
That will probably happen again before it's all said and done. That the lightning rod of a movie, The Last Jedi, and there'll be more movies like that. And I'll be curious to see what this next Captain America movie and others. We got some comic book movies, whether that's gonna do Finding the Good and the other. There'll be more ways to practice and exercise that in our world. So, folks out there, help us, chime in on the socials. What do you think? What will you choose? How can you see the good in the other? I think this does apply to our own faith and how we operate in the worlds and communities we're a part of. Look for that good in the other and try to see from their perspective. And I think it's hard to hate up close with those in front of you. All right, Andy, time to wrap this thing up. We are going to have an extra question we're going to share here in a minute that we hope the Patreons can go on there and listen to. But before we head out, some recommendations. Anything we've talked about tonight, or perhaps there's something else out there you want to recommend the folks to go deeper or just to geek out on? What are some recommendations you have?
Yeah, so another story where there's kind of this intersection of science and magic, and is it magic or is it just applied science in a different way, is the book by Neil Stevenson and Nicole Galland, I'm not sure, called The Rise and Fall of Dodo. And then Nicole Galland wrote a follow-up to that called The Master of Revolves. But they're time travel stories. They're also kind of multiverse stories because they're basically going and it's about finding different strands of the timeline and encouraging different events in different strands so that a majority of the strands turn out a certain way. And so being able to find the right timeline involves what they describe as magic, right? So there are these people that kind of use magic to sort of intuitively figure out the math of the timelines and where they need to wind up back in time to get the results that they're trying to achieve in the present. They're sort of tinkering with the past to get better outcomes in the present or desired outcomes in the present. And so there's some of that interesting interplay of, is it science, is it magic? There's cool time travel. There's a lot of neat learning about neat things to learn about the particular time periods that they focus on. Neil Stevenson is a research monster. Puts all kinds of details into his historical fiction type books, and so there's a lot of cool things in those books. And so if you're interested in this, in getting a little bit of magic in your science or science in your magic, I think that's a good place to do that. That's off the beaten track.
Yeah, I wrote that down. That's cool. Have you ever heard of the book, This Is How You Lose the Time War?
Not only have I heard of it, but I just read it recently.
Boy, oh man, so good. That's a whole nother. I was just talk about enchantment, just enchanted with this story and loved it so much. And another time war story. We'll have to talk about that on another podcast. But man, that book is absolutely beautiful. And my daughter recommended that to me, and I couldn't put it down. Every sentence is beautifully written. Very, very good. Just spoiler. Did you like it, Andy? Did you like that book?
Did I like that book? I did.
Yeah.
I don't know that I was necessarily as enchanted with it as some of the people that recommended it to me, but it's certainly very well done and very poetic. It's not quite as straightforward of a narrative. It's a very interesting kind of stylistic approach, and it's actually written by two different people, and so it's a series of letters kind of going back and forth. And so I think the two of them sort of alternated who was writing, writing the different characters. So that's an interesting structure. I think there's a twist that I thought was a little bit more obvious than I think it was supposed to seem. But maybe that's just because I've read too many time travel stories.
There you go.
But yeah, no, very, very well done. And a quick read. So, worth giving a try.
Yeah, agree. Cool. My recommendation, I just interviewed John Hendricks on our YouTube channel, who wrote The Mythmakers, about the friendship of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And that book inspired me to read more of Tolkien and Lewis in their own voice and language. It's been a while. Like, I've read all their books, but it's been a while since I've read them. And after reading The Mythmakers, wanted to go back and read some of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and found a copy. I don't know if my dad read it or not, but as we're cleaning out some of my dad's stuff with him passing away, found a copy of Mere Christianity that I think I bought him, like, it says in there, Merry Christmas 2005. Don't know if he ever read it, but it was beside his chair, and I was like, oh wow, it's right there. And so I grabbed it, and I just started reading it. I was like, I just did this interview talking about the friendship of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and so I was like, I haven't read this book in a really long time. It's definitely foundational for me in terms of capturing my imagination and love of theology, but it's been a while since I read the book. And so I picked it up and started reading again, and it's just so, I just love C.S. Lewis's voice and how he writes. And you know, I'm at a different stage of my life and faith reading this book and kind of thinking, hearing his arguments, but, or case for Christianity, but hearing his voice and how he writes on the page, I think is so good. So my recommendation, if you haven't read one of their books in a long time, pick it up again. I love it that, you know, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were systematic geekologists. They gathered together and talked about the things they geeked out on, and that Mere Christianity was basically BBC radio broadcast. So basically, he was podcasting some of his thoughts, and here we are doing the same things that he was doing way back then. So those are our recommendations. Again, folks, rate and review the show, share and support. And you get an extra question if you become a patron. As little as $3 a month. You can get the answer to this question that we're getting ready to ask Andy. Okay, twofold. If you could be an expert in any field of science, not the one you're already an expert in, what would it be if you had to choose another science? And if you could live in any magic-based fandom, what would it be? And I'll answer the same. I'm not an expert in science, but if I could be, I know my answer, and I will answer that in a little bit. And I know which realm that I would want to be in a magic-based fandom realm. So hop on over to Patreon if you're not already a member. Join, and really appreciate your support and you listening. Share with your friends. Man, we couldn't be more thankful for geeking out with all of you. So as always, remember, share the faith. Share the geek.
Check out our merch online at the SG Shop. There you can find clothing such as hat, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more things like glassware, mugs, bags, and posters. My favorite shirt design is the one that says all reading counts. So make sure you check out the store and find your new favorite merch.
Be sure to check out other Anazal Ministry Podcast AMP Network shows. You can see the whole network in a single feed if you're on Spotify, or you could go to Apple Podcasts and find the Anazal Ministries Network podcast, the AMP Network. Yeah, there's just a network on Apple. You can follow the whole thing. You'll get shows like The Homily, where Pastor Will goes through his homily messages. It's literally just Pastor Will's sermons, guys. It's great. You also get access to the Whole Church podcast, where TJ and myself interview leaders from across different denominations and backgrounds to work towards a more full church unity. You can see My Seminary Life, where Brandon Knight discusses his experiences at seminary and then discusses seminary topics, so anyone can have access to knowledge available to seminary students. You also can see Let Nothing Move You over there, where Christian Ashley goes through the Bible in a Bible study type fashion and explains the whole biblical narrative. I also have a show on there, The Dummy for Theology, where we discuss various theological topics in an attempt to show every side of the discussions, leaving you with more questions than answers. There's also The Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a more progressive view to challenge the status quo of the modern church. Finally, you can hear The Clydes, where Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde go through weekly discussions in a devotional conversational style method to help us all get closer to one another and to God.